Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mellissa Thomas of Florida National News coming to you, the FNN Politics Power Series for your Tuesday, July 28th, 2020. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm excited to announce that this week is Ambassadors Week here at the FNN Politics Power Show. And to start out the first episode for the week, we have Her Excellency Yolande Smith, who is Grenada's ambassador to the U.S. So I'm going to put the overlay back over just so you guys can take a look, just to have a look-see at who we're going to be interviewing today. And a quick bio of Her Excellency, Ms. Yolande Smith. She is Grenada's appointed ambassador to the U.S. and a permanent representative to the Organization of American States, or the OAS. Now, she wears a lot of hats in these two roles, but in these capacities, she heads Grenada's mission in Washington, D.C., representing Grenada's interests to the U.S. government and to 34 other countries which comprise the OAS, while fostering closer relations between Grenada and Grenadians in the diaspora throughout the United States. And of course, she's no stranger to multilateral relations in the international community. She has over 25 years in the diplomatic service. So we get to glean on all of that amazing experience today. Her first posting was at the Consulate General in Toronto from 1995 to 99. From 1999 to 2008, she was stationed at the Embassy in Washington, D.C. And in March of 2009, she joined the staff of the Procurement and Strategic Budget Management Division of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. So we're going to get into it. We're going to get into a lot more detail with Her Excellency, Ms. Yolande Smith. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mellissa. How are you?
Doing great, Madam Ambassador. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on our show today. I appreciate you.
Not at all. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Sure. So just real quick before we even get into the conversation, guys, I'll let you kind of brag on the nation of Grenada for a minute, kind of talk about why it meant so much to you to be able to hold this post as Grenada's ambassador to the U.S. and what is so special and beautiful about the nation of Grenada.
Well, Grenada, as many people would know, is the spice capital of the world. And that means per capita, we have the most spices. And I think second to Indonesia, we export the most nutmeg. But what makes this post special for me is because it is actually one of the senior positions in our foreign service, but it also gives me the opportunity to serve at the highest level. And it's really about service to people, the Grenadian diaspora, as well as service to prospective investors and visitors to Grenada as well. So it is a key strategic position, and I'm thankful to the government of Grenada for giving me that opportunity to serve in this capacity, because of course I serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister and the ruling government, and through him, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, through whom I take my remit. But I'm very happy to be here just because it is a role of service more than anything else.
Awesome. Now, before we get too deep into the conversation, guys, I'm going to give you a very quick, like literally just over 30-second glimpse into the beautiful nation of Grenada. Check this video out.
Stepping off the plane, it's so easy to breathe again. Life in the big city has finally took its toll. And it's been so long, but I'm finally home and what better place to rest my weary bones.
There you go.
Oh,
so I wanted to give, I know. Yeah, we were talking about that just before we went live. I mean, talk a little bit about that and what that means to you, getting into our conversation now, especially with the pandemic and how things are now. Like, talk about that sort of connection that you feel with the nation of Grenada and how homesick you have been feeling.
And I know I say homesick because there's just a little more freedom in Grenada. Because if you look at what's going on and you look at the television and you look at some of the countries who've been struggling to get a hold of this pandemic and to keep everything in check, Grenada has been on a quasi lockdown. But at the same time, you have the ability to go on the beach. You have the ability to go to your verandas. Most people don't live in an apartment complex where you have to stay inside or they're shared amenities. You have your single family homes, so you can go on your veranda, you can get the breeze, you can take a mango. Most people here can't go to the grocery store, so those are the things that make me homesick. But at the same time, just going back to why I enjoy this position here, there are people who have been stranded here in the US as well. So then I had to take the focus away from the things that I miss that are the comforts of home into taking care of the people here who are, stuck in a foreign land, as we say. So it's been bittersweet. It's been bittersweet. I would give anything to be home right now, but I won't do that as long as there are people still stranded and trying to be repatriated back home. So it's the two sides of the coin.
Right. So talk about that process that you guys are working on at the embassy, and what you have the ability to do to help folks return back home, or if there are restrictions, how you help them navigate that, or for even folks who still want to come to the US from Grenada, is there a bit of a travel ban with Grenada with that, considering that the US is currently a hotspot for COVID-19? Talk about that.
Well, I'll talk about it going southbound first. Going home, Grenada has a phased reopening process. So at first we try to repatriate just nationals who were stranded first and foremost. So of course there are Grenadians here who would love to go home like me and spend that time in quarantine at home, where you get, your family surrounding you. But at the same time, we were just focusing on those who came on vacation, those who came for medical attention and found themselves stranded because the borders were closed. So to no fault of theirs, they were here stranded, visas are expiring, timestamps expiring. And that's one of the functions the embassy, well, of course, the consular section of the embassy, that's one of our functions here, to look after the interests of nationals in the diaspora. So at one point we were seized with that, and it was a lot of long nights and days trying to ascertain where people are in the US, because of course most people don't contact their consulates when they get to when they go overseas, because you think you just go just for leisure and that's your business. You don't have to contact your consulate. But when you find yourself in situations like this, when it's a crisis, it's a pandemic, and you have no control over, your funds are running low. So we encourage people through the social media platform to let us know where they are. So we kept a database of nationals who were stranded. And what we found over time is that, as I said again, they were running low on funds. So that's what the Diaspora arm of the embassy and Grenada out here comes in, and it kicks in. We're like, how best do we try to see if we can meet the needs of people here who are stranded? Because, Caribbean people, and I'm speaking not just of Grenada, but the Caribbean and the diaspora as a whole, we take care of our own. So people come to you and you give them accommodation and so, but when you lose your job and when you lose your livelihood, that person becomes a burden very quickly. And, the atmosphere becomes a little toxic. And at the same time, too, you who are there as a guest, you feel bad because you think that you're a burden on that person as well. So it takes an emotional toll on people. So we found ourselves, myself and my staff, becoming counselors over this time and getting healing as well. Because like I said, I was homesick and I've been quarantined for a while. So when we answer the phone and we hear what they're saying, we're able to sort of resonate and give assurance. But we were able to, with 7 diaspora organizations here and the embassy and the consulates in Miami and DC, set up a fund, a COVID diaspora response fund, to help just in the little ways we can to help people get meals, to help to get a phone card so you can, talk to people back home. So that was one of the things I think we were seized with. We had a repatriation flight out of New York that went very well. Of course, there are protocols that we had to. So now the border, going back to the substantive question, the borders are reopened, but in a phased way. We have just chartered flights out of the United States, because we've categorized green, yellow, and red. So safe, low risk, medium risk, and high risk, the US being high risk. So out of the US is only chartered flights so that it's controlled. Out of Canada, which is one of the medium, and the European Union and the UK, that's medium. So there are different tiers of the protocols and how people are re-entered. But we have intra-regional travel that became effective July 15th. So people from the Caribbean diaspora is able to fly into Grenada. Of course, there are protocols that must be adhered to, and as it relates to quarantine, as it relates to testing and so forth. And that's outlined on the Ministry of Health page, as well as the embassy website. We have their travel Grenada. So we're really, as our Prime Minister said over and over, because he has been on the airways. And of course, this is a time when we use social media to our benefit. There was a time when you think, people are just getting into your business on Facebook. And so now we crave the opportunity every time to get the word out there and to encourage people to come home, but just to make sure that, the safety of the people are taken care of. We have to make sure safety for people on the ground as well as safety for people coming in as well. Yeah.
Right. And you touched on it just now, but talk a little bit more about the Prime Minister's addresses, because obviously during the pandemic, he's been doing regular addresses to the nation, and it's been made available to the diaspora through the GIS. So talk a little bit about that as well.
Well, I guess it gives me to give a plug for the Prime Minister as well, because he's no stranger to managing crisis. Because of course, the world might remember we had Hurricane Ivan, and that was a devastating blow to Grenada at that time. And he led us through that natural disaster. Of course, COVID is a different type of disaster, but that's when leadership comes to bear on a situation, and we were able to rebuild bigger and better under his leadership. And of course, the leadership of his cabinet now through our Minister of Health and the COVID response team as well. They have done an excellent job in making sure that information is disseminated on a timely and factual basis. And people in the diaspora as well as those at home were always privy to the next step, because of course this is a fluid situation. COVID is novel. It's called a novel virus, so it means it's new and it's unfolding daily. So with the science and everything else, they've had to make decisions, but no decisions were made without bringing it to the people, not necessarily on consulting with them, but making sure they're there step and step. And if they have to, step back a bit based on the concerns raised by nationals, and so they were always able to do that in a very transparent and open manner, as you say, through GIS and Facebook. So I think they handled that at the early stages of the crisis very well. And I think Grenada, as most of the Caribbean, are best practice. I think if history would be written, that we handled the situation very well with the limited resources we have. I think we were able to handle that very well. Our Prime Minister has been very vocal. He's always been there, so you can see him, although he's not a health expert, but as a manager and as a politician, I think he has taken on that job really well. Yeah.
Awesome. And don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to come back and have even more great conversation with Her Excellency Yolande Smith. Stay tuned. We'll be back.
Big business and special interest groups have begun their attacks on Rick Singh on social media, radio, television. They want to make sure he's no longer in office. Have someone, anyone but Rick Singh in office. And the reason is simple. They don't want to pay their fair share and expect you to pay it for them. Now, the question is, do you want to pay it for them?
All right, guys, welcome back to our FNN Politics and Power interview with Her Excellency Yolande Smith, who is Grenada's ambassador to the United States. So I wanted to also get into those many hats that you do wear, because not only are you Grenada's ambassador to the U.S., but you have that permanent mission, as part of the OAS. So kind of talk about your function in that role as well.
Okay, so the permanent representative to the OAS is an ambassadorial role. Grenada, as it stands, and 12 out of our CARICOM counterparts have dual ambassadors. So the ambassador to the White House is the same ambassador to the OAS. And in that function, which is more on a multilateral arena, we negotiate and collaborate with our members, our member nations in the Western Hemisphere, in the Americas, as it's called. So we have Canada, the US, Mexico, South Central America, and the Caribbean, all in that one space. And we look at things like human rights, multidimensional security for the region, as well as education, health, and so that comes under the integral development pillar. And in that space, Grenada had the chairmanship of both the Permanent Council and the Council for Integral Development. And those are the two main political bodies within the OAS. For a 9-month period, we had that. And in that multilateral arena, we look at issues that relate to, and as I said, human rights. And so we had Venezuela on the table at one point when Grenada was in the chair, as well as Nicaragua. So two hot topics in the region. So there's a lot of diplomacy, a lot of negotiating, a lot of wheeling and dealing, and a lot of policy going on within that arena. So that's one hat. The US is bilateral. So it's mainly the US and Grenada relations. And also the position here in Washington, D.C., we're also the seat of the non-resident ambassador to Mexico and the non-resident high commissioner to Canada as well. So those are the official hats. But also I'm Miss Yolande on story time, and I'm Gigi to my grandchildren. So there's a lot there. We can add more hats to the mix. And you see my smile brighten when I talk about those two hats, because it gives me a chance to be me. And then I'm not always, I don't have to be politically correct, and I don't have to think of all the bureaucracy and the red tape and all the missteps I can make, or, all the wheeling and dealing. But it is a lot, and it's a position that I relish. I do. I think I'm able to make a difference and to represent Grenada adequately, of course, with guidance from our foreign affairs. So that's where we take policy direction from, and everything, that they're trying to achieve. Of course, my role is to make sure that we find avenues to do that here. But it is, we have a very small staff, a very, very small staff. So 4 offices, but 1 staff handling all of those here in Washington, D.C. But it's not a complaint. It's not a complaint at all. I want to just thank you to my staff who keep me afloat daily, because it's a lot. And sometimes they say when we were in the chair for 9 months, that's aside from everything else that we're charged with. We have 34 countries to shoulder as well when you're in the chair. So I must thank my staff as well.
And to that point of, in terms of shouldering those other countries, are you also, what kind of negotiations are you working on with those other nations? Are they economic? Are they, because you mentioned policy as well. So is it sometimes economic policy? Is it having to do with political relations between, dignitaries and political leaders in the respective nations? Kind of flesh that out a little bit more for our audience to understand.
All of the above, as well as the more tangible things as well, because we try to get cooperation agreements with countries as well within that space. So countries like Chile and Argentina and Brazil and Mexico, they give a lot of scholarship for the English-speaking nations. So we try to take advantage of that as well. So we negotiate for scholarships for Grenadians to study in different fields, both at the undergrad and graduate level. So there are different courses. And of course, Grenada, the Ministry of Education has a sort of list of the fields that they want to make sure that people, study based on where our country's heading. So technology at one point was one of that. Agribusiness was another one. And then of course now sustainable development, because we have to think, climate change is at our doorstep right now, the effects of climate change and mitigating that. And so that's one of the new fields of study that we're trying to, and Chile has been given scholarships on that. So that's one of the things that we've been negotiating on, not just Grenada, but CARICOM as a block as well, because we try to make sure that what we get it's sort of regional, because we're interdependent in the Caribbean. There is there is the Caribbean Common CSME, market and economy. So we're trying to make sure that no one nation lags behind the other. So we try to make sure that, and even as 14 members within that 34 member states at the OAS, it's a large block. So we can leverage for that. We can negotiate. We have that power to do so as well if we're unified. So it's very interesting. But there's a lot of politics that go on. But of course, there's a lot of developmental issues that we try to hit while we're there as well.
And that actually transitions perfectly into my next question, which was, I know one of the focuses as ambassador, for Grenada to the U.S. is bringing investors to the nation of Grenada as well. So kind of talk about that arm of your duties and how you normally go about that, how you build those relations. And I mean, is it more so functions that you're doing at different events here in the United States? Do you sometimes travel to foster business relations back to Grenada as well? Kind of talk about that.
Well, it's interesting that you said that, because again, I'm going back to the fact that we have a very small staff and we don't have a trade attaché. So as ambassador, I fill in that role, but we have a very, very close relationship with the Grenada Investment Development Corporation, which is government's arm of the economic development in Grenada. And it's a one-stop shop. So actually during the COVID, we've had, I think, 2 virtual meetings with them, because of course they had to reshape their portfolio as to what's available and what can be, physically or not done within the space. And while agribusinesses, I keep going back to that. That's one of the things, because of food security and other things, we try to make sure that we shore up on those areas. So they would let us know what areas are available for investors to come into, those that are ready-made projects, and the general areas that they would seek investment in. And our job, as you say, is to shop that. So at different events, and so we shop those ideas, and we also open ourselves for people who are willing to invest. And what we do, we're sort of the middleman between them and GIDC. So we hand that over for site visits and so. And what we've done more so now is the pharmaceuticals and wellness firms and so that are trying to invest in Grenada. So we make that connection and we hand it off, because we don't have the expertise here, but it's one of our key functions, and we take that role seriously. Yeah.
Awesome. And how have you seen the pandemic affect those projects specifically, though? Like, obviously, everything went virtual in terms of the meetings and being able to connect with people, but in terms of on the ground there in Grenada, how has the pandemic affected some of the development projects?
It has, but I must say as well, and that's another reason when I say government listens, I think the construction industry, it took a terrible, terrible blow in the onset of the pandemic, but they were able to get regulations in place and have permits and so that these projects can continue, because we have 2 or 3 major hotel projects that were on the island that were ongoing, and there was a lull, but construction was one of the first industries that were opened back with proper protocols in place. And I think it's perhaps one of the showcase, one of the things that we can do as best practice to the rest of the region is to do that, because the economy has to go on. While you take the health of the nation at heart, you can't do them in silos, but you have to make sure that it's safe for everybody. But the construction industry was the first to get back on foot with proper protocols, and then they build from there into the tourism industry right now. And there's a lot of training going on in that sector, and that's sector-wide. So from the taxi drivers to the hotel owners, to staff, the restaurants, everybody has had to go through intensive training. So while the country was on lockdown, there was a lot going on at the background. And I want to say hats off to our Minister of Tourism and Civil Aviation, together with our Ministry of Health and the Grenada Tourism Authority, for making sure that when we do open back fully, we're ready. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. Yeah. So given all of that, kind of talk a little bit about, you mentioned a little bit earlier about the connection between the embassy in D.C. and then the consulates in various other locations. But kind of flesh that out a little bit more as well. Talk about how the embassy interconnects with the various consulates around the country, and where they're located.
Yes. So the embassy, actually, just based on the Vienna Convention, all consulates fall under the embassies, under the auspices of the embassy. So we have 3 consulates. There is one in DC. So within the embassy, so that's a 5th hat. Technically, there is a separate consulate within the Embassy of Grenada in Washington, D.C. We have the Consulate General in Miami and the Consulate General in New York as well. So those are the other two major consulates. And what we do is just to make sure that there's consistency across the consulates, the way we handle consular services, and that takes in the issuance of passports, visas, travel documents. The only thing that is separate that the embassy handles that the other consulate don't is deportation. So the embassy is the sole one. So even if you get people in the state of Florida or New York or all points in between, those are referred to the embassy. But all the other consular services, and there's a myriad of those, they're handled by the consulate. But we try to make sure that we speak in the same voice. So if you call the consulate in New York or the one in Miami or DC, you should get the same answer. So we have regular meetings and we try to make sure that we're in sync. But the roles of the consulate, as apart from the embassy and all the other bilaterals we do, they focus mainly on the diaspora here in the US.
And in terms of those roles, it's important to speak in the same voice, but in terms of the roles, what do you feel is the difference between the role, like your role as an ambassador versus someone who is a consulate, someone who's a consulate general?
So again, I will go back to the fact that they do consular services, and they're not necessarily, because the ambassador then is the titular representative for Grenada here. And in my case, for instance, I am ENP, Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary. So I can sign documents on behalf of the government. I can take action and decisions on behalf of the government, while the consulate don't have the ability to do that. So they'll still have to reference the embassy. So almost you take it up a notch. It was tiered. You take it up a notch. But trade and investment and making those connections and sending that to GIDC, they can do that as well, because again, we're short staffed. And let's say Miami, for instance, is more that hub for business, and based on its geographic location and in relation to the region, you find more businesses or business opportunities out of Miami to the region. So the Consulate General in Miami, for instance, would do a lot with the Chamber of Commerce there in Miami and get those things and send it. So when we had that virtual call, the consulates were on that call with GIDC as well, so that we know, all of us, what the priority areas are for Grenada, what's available, what's on the table, what we're looking for, and we can all speak to that as well. But the only difference really is taking decisions of a certain magnitude on behalf of government, and the consulates can't do that.
Got you. Thank you for that. One of the aims of our show is to always educate our audience on some of the lesser known things that are quite important, but they probably just need to get a little more information. So thank you for breaking that down for us. All right, guys, we're going to take, no problem. We're going to take one more quick commercial break, guys, and we will be back with Her Excellency Yolande Smith. We're going to talk some more. So stay tuned, guys.
At Duke Energy, we deliver electricity and so much more, like free home energy assessments, rebates for energy-saving improvements, payment options to help you better manage your budget, and even bill credits for helping the community use less energy. So no matter what you're doing, we can help you make better energy choices every day. It's just another way we bring power to your life. How much can you save?
All right, guys, we are back with Her Excellency Yolande Smith, Ambassador, Grenada's Ambassador to the United States. So just getting into a little bit more of that sort of discussion with the roles within the embassy, the kind of day-to-day responsibilities that you face within the embassy. I did want to ask, what is the most common question or issue that you face for customers or travelers coming into the embassy? What's the most common pain point?
I think it perhaps would be passport related. Yeah, if I have to say on a daily basis, it may be passport related. What I would like them to talk about more, though, is joining our database and becoming part of the conversation. Yes. But we do, I think, because, and again, as you said, your show is one that educates and expounds on different things, because sometimes they think that's all we do, that the only thing the consulates or the embassy is known for is when your passport expires. So I think perhaps the job is on us as well to make sure that we educate people out there to say that there's a myriad of services that we perform, but also that we want to make sure there is that it's a two-way street. that we get to call on their expertise as well, and to
Right.
listen to them more. Yeah,
Awesome. And
definitely.
have you guys by chance encountered key connections or fostered key relationships just from folks passing through the embassy? Maybe you meet someone who is crucial in the business arena there, or someone who's key even in the diaspora here in the US. So you're like, oh, this is actually a pretty good person to connect with. Have you had encounters like that?
All the time. And I think perhaps it's just based on my personality too. Sometimes I go downstairs, or sometimes the staff not there, or they're doing something else and there's an appointment, and I go down and I meet with people, and I don't choose who. Sometimes I just randomly go down. And just recently, just before COVID, it was a doctor, a Grenadian doctor who is based in the US Virgin Islands. And she came in to get a passport, came into town, and she is just the most vibrant young woman. And we had her, she contributed to the nationals going home on that flight, because of course, like I said, she's a medical doctor, so she wanted to talk PPE and she wanted to advise us on different things. And I met her before COVID, and it was just a chance meeting that I went down in the middle of the day because, you know, she came in to just do consular stuff. And like I said, I did not know who she was, but we had that connection, and now we're in touch on Instagram and other media, so we know what's going on. So when she saw that we had the fund, she just picked up the phone and said, hey, Madam Ambassador, I say, you know, the folks are going home. What's the need? What should we do? How can I contribute? And, you know, just like that. But it doesn't have to be a doctor. It doesn't necessarily have to be a doctor. I met a family who Rastafarian from Chicago, and they came in because their daughter got through to Howard University, and they thought of just coming into the embassy, but they requested to see the ambassador because they were from out of town. And we had this conversation. I spent a good time, you know, just at the conference room talking about, you know, their lifestyle, and the husband was from Grenada, you know, and so like that. So in any given day, you make these connections, and we try to, you know, have them join the database so that we can, you know, keep the conversation going and use the expertise where there's need for that. So yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, talk a little bit more about that database and why it was so important for you and your team to kind of revamp it a little bit. I know there was a previous posting on the embassy's website. Some of the email addresses that were there, unfortunately, were bouncing back. So you guys decided to go ahead and do a full-on campaign to kind of revise it a little bit. But talk a little bit more about that.
That was one of the first initiatives that we had when I came in, because I tell people I like to work smart and not hard, because going back to the point you made, we have these people out there that we don't know. They have the expertise, but of course, Grenada and the different Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the line ministries will call and ask us information, you know, about education, this new program. And so I'm not an education expert, but we have people out there who do it. So if we have a database by skills, and so I can just say, hey, the ministry is looking for this. How would you advise me on that? Or in the case of COVID, I was able to call on someone in the medical profession and say, we're looking for PPE, we're looking for this, we're looking for that. So I am not taking out of my day to go do the research because they know it already. So really and truly what we felt is that it's a connection. It has to be a strategic engagement, because there are needs in Grenada and they have the expertise to fill those needs. And instead of us just scrambling at the time when there is a crisis, it should be ongoing. So then we don't feel anxious when something like that comes up, because we have the resources at our fingertip. And it just also gives people a chance to just be part of your community out here as well. So it's a two-way street for us, for their expertise, and for them to be able to give back in a concerted way, and also to belong to the greater community of Grenadians out here, or just Caribbean nationals as well, and Friends of Grenada. So the database is called Grenadian Friends of Grenada, because we have people who have met who were in the Peace Corps at some point way back, and, you know, spend time in Grenada and have affinity for Grenada and want to know what's going on there as well. So yeah.
And where can people go to sign up or be a part of that database?
So it's on the website. It's GrenadaEmbassyUSA.org, and you can just do /database, and it takes you directly to that. And it's just a short form. It takes less than 3 minutes to fill out, and you can put as much as you want in there. Yeah. But thank you for that plug, because and let me just tell you, perhaps I just segue because I like to talk.
Yeah, go ahead.
For the first week of the COVID, because of course I was working from home, I did not want people to call and get a voicemail or become anxious because they did not get to talk to somebody. So I spent the first 2 weeks manning the telephone.
Wow.
And nobody got away from calling the embassy without signing up for that database. And at the time, we did not have a stranded by COVID database, because, of course, that evolved with the situation. But just at first, people wanting to know the border is closed. Is the embassy open? What can I do? Just the general questions. I felt they should get an answer on the first ring, because outside of that, people get anxious and then they think, all is lost. So I spent that first 2 weeks, and then it became unsustainable, because then the calls started to come by the hundreds, and I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle it after that. But I thought it was important, and nobody got away from signing up for that database. So I'm glad you bring it up. And my staff do it, whenever they answer the phone, and that was in peacetime, not wartime, not COVID time. But every time is a good time to make sure that people sign up and be a part of what's going on, and even with the associations as well. So when you sign up for that, it gives you a chance to find out where there's an association in your neck of the woods, whether it's Georgia, Florida, wherever it is that you get to find out as well. That information is on the website.
Got you. And this looks like it. Is that the correct link?
That's technology is so beautiful. That's it.
Absolutely. Right. And we wanted to make it big enough for you guys to absolutely read it, make sure it's a quick glance. You can be able to check that out, especially if you are a part of the diaspora and you're watching this interview and you did not know about the database. That is your link. Go ahead and head over there and fill out the information and join the database. We here at Florida National News count as friends of the diaspora. So yes, we are part of that. Yes, we are part of that database. And, thank you so much for introducing us to it and having us be a part of that. We appreciate you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And you know what? If you allow me, I didn't even ask how's your family doing. How remiss of me to not ask how your family's doing. Sorry.
No problem. Fortunately, my family as well. I pray your family is safe and well as well. Especially now that I know that you have grandkids. I didn't even know that. Is everyone safe and okay?
Everybody's well, thank you. And in the initial stages, I kept telling people I am staying home for my grandchildren. If you have to find a reason, if you think just listening to the news or watching the news is not enough, find a reason to stay home. And I stayed home for my grandkids. So yeah, they're doing well. And I have siblings in Grenada, and nieces and nephews as well. And I'm in constant contact with them. They're doing well. Yeah.
That's good. That's good to know. Yeah. So what do you, at this point, between the pandemic and Grenada gradually reopening its borders, what do you feel is the most pressing thing that members of the diaspora or, natives back at home, what do you feel is the most pressing thing that they need to know right now?
I think we have to look at the science and listen to the experts. And I think we can't become complacent. Grenada had only 23 confirmed cases, all recovered. So no deaths at all. And we've been COVID-free since June 18th. We've been certified COVID-free. But I don't want people to get complacent. And I want to just reiterate that you must wear a mask. You must wear a mask to protect yourself and to protect everybody else. I have mine right here. I'm not joking. And today we had a student. So I have two, and I have one in the car as well. None of that much, but I am armed. And this one sort of, if I'm a fashionista, then I can say this. But this is my go-to. And I wore this one in here this morning. We had, and this is just a segue. You talk about the services we provide, and there are challenges that they become opportunities. Our Ministry of Education called 2 weeks ago to say that a high school student who was taking his exams, the Caribbean certificate examination, he got stranded out here. I think he would have come out during the Easter break to visit his dad. And exams are going on at home, and he cannot do his examinations, which he's paid for. And
wow.
So they asked us to invigilate. We've never done that before. And of course, there's so much security around the papers, the testing and the time and things like that. So they reached out to the embassy, and fortunately we were able to do that. So that's one of the services we can put under our belt. It was not in any law. It was not in, in our sites at all, but we were able to do that. Today was his last exam. He had his English exam today. So being in here, I still had to wear my mask because he came, he's with his family here, of course. I take his temperature every morning. We're set up. We're not open to the public as yet, but we're set up in the event that we will, open back for in-person services. Right now, we're just doing everything by mail, but I was able to take his temperature. I was able to converse with him using my mask. So
right.
I wear it all the time. So. And, sometimes I think people are finding reasons not to wear it, but it's really for your safety and for the safety of others. You wouldn't want to go to bed in the night knowing that somehow you contributed to somebody's death or somebody feeling, like really, really ill because of negligence. Something as simple as wearing a mask. And now, you can get them. They're not expensive. I don't think they're more than $5 in some instances. You can make it yourself. I think that would be the next project with my granddaughter, to make masks.
Nice.
But, if there's one thing I can say is wear the mask. And any other protocols, of course, the hand washing. We knew that since we were young, but now somehow they have to tell us, wash your hands after the bathroom and things like that. And I just had an experiment with my kids on story time, the importance of washing your hands with soap as opposed to just with water, and how it, takes care of the germs. So it's just the little things like that. And I just feel that we can't stress it too much, and we can't think, well, it's just too simple a thing to say. As simple as that. Wear your mask and follow the protocols. And stay inside if you don't have to. If you're not essential, and if your city isn't open, don't try to open it if it's not open. Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually wanted to get your thoughts on the difference that you've seen between the reaction in Grenada versus the response you've seen nationally here in terms of the mask. And like you said, folks trying to open their cities, using their First Amendment right to peacefully protest. In some cases, kind of scarily with, what happened in Michigan and those guys showing up with their machine guns. That was very interesting. But getting your personal thoughts on the idea, in terms of the difference you saw between what was happening here and what happened in Grenada, especially with the difference in the number of cases. Obviously, Grenada is a much smaller nation, much smaller population. So the numbers would be smaller, but just your thoughts on the difference in the responses.
I think it has a lot to do with early decisive action more than anything else. And this is not a blow to anybody or me being biased. And I think not just Grenada, but in the Caribbean as a whole, early decisive action. So you have a leadership that cares, number one. And number two, you have a team behind you that is not afraid to say, this is the hard line we have to take. Grenada shut down. It wasn't the most popular thing to do. It wasn't the most popular. And we had, outcries from different pockets until you see the reality, and until you realize, oh my God, I am glad they took that action, because that saved us some more, or that made it easier then for us to get to open faster or to open safer. So you would never please everybody, but I think as leaders, you have to make the decision that not necessarily is popular, but the one that really safeguards the people. And I think in the absence of that, then chaos and so can ensue, and then you have a lot of regrets down the road. But I think I would attribute it to the leadership and our COVID task force as well. And I can't say it enough. I am very proud to be Grenada's representative here. And it could be anywhere in the world at this point, because I think Grenada handled the pandemic with excellently. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. All right, guys, we're going to take another quick commercial break and come back and get a little more on the personal side of things. You guys know we always do that here at the FNN Politics and Power Series. We like to get into the work part and then start to venture over into the person and learn a little bit more about the guest as a person. So stay tuned. We will be right back after this brief break.
We wanted to move back home to be closer to his family. We decided to go with pods because things were stressful enough.
We weren't sure how long we were going to need storage for, so we needed something that was flexible, and then they can deliver the container to wherever we move to.
We haven't found the perfect house yet, but we're still looking.
And we are back. very brief break.
Yes.
But wanted to definitely ask you, given the rigors of your various hats that you do wear, talk about the parts that motivate you the most and what you feel is the most meaningful or gratifying part of your duties. Kind of talk about that.
Well, definitely it would be when I'm in service to others, because I think, everybody has a calling and everybody has a role. I've had, as I said, I worked at the IMF for 6 years, almost a very big organization, a very prestigious organization as well. But I felt that yearning. So if anybody paid attention to the bio you read, I started here and I think I'm inching my way back. It's really about service for me, and not necessarily in the limelight, but as long as I can serve, I think that's my happy place. That's my happy place. And perhaps since we're talking personal, I'm an introvert, and it may not appear to people that I am. I am an introvert, so I don't seek the limelight. I'm thrust into it, and I think perhaps I handle it well. But for me, even if it's just one person at a time, and especially young people, for me, I think that's where my calling is, in service. And for the last couple of years, it's been in service to nationals. And I think if at the end of the day, especially throughout this crisis, if at the end of the day, people can say that, they called the embassy in their time of need and they were able to get, and of course we don't have the funds or so to make sure everybody's taken care of, but you were able to answer the phone, you were able to listen, and listening is very, very important. So you're able to listen and to empathize. And I think for me, that is my strong suit, and that is the most rewarding part of this job, barring the titles and everything else, is to be able to serve. Definitely. Yeah.
Gotcha. Awesome. That's beautiful. And I mean, how often do you get the chance to speak with your folks that are back home, given the rigors of your job here?
You have to make time. And I was speaking to somebody yesterday that gave me a manuscript to read, and I said, in everything else you have to carve time out. You have to carve time out for God. So I wake up in the morning, and before I do anything else, it's tempting to roll over because you went to sleep and there are 10 different emails and a lot of documents to read. I find time to commune with God first before I do anything else. So you have to find time. I find time with my family, and I think that is, I don't know if anybody knows, but perhaps they'll figure it out. I do story time with Miss Yolande, and it's because during the pandemic, I started to read to my nephew in Grenada and my granddaughter who's in Colorado. So I made time during the day when things were frantic and I'm answering the phone call just to find my center. I made time for them. And I thought, well, how many other families would like to just get a break? Or how can I bless another family by, just putting it out there? No, I have kids that when my day get busy, because now things have picked back up a bit, and sometimes I have 3 or 4 Zoom calls, some simultaneously. When I don't get the chance to just spend that half an hour with them, I feel I miss it. So it was for them, but I think now it's for me, just in that. But I make time, and in everything else, you can't be too big for the things that matter. You can't be too big, so I make time. The long and short is I make time. Yeah.
Awesome. I hope everybody watching just caught that. That was a bar. Ambassador, I usually call it like a bar alert, like just something that is like a key quote that everyone needs to catch. That one was a bar. You can't be too big for the things that matter. That was a very important quote. So thank you so much for sharing that. And man, that was actually very touching, knowing that you not only made the time for your family, but also chose to be a blessing to other families as well. And I'm sure that is gratifying, seeing the smiles on their faces as you share the story time. And I love that it was gratifying for you. Like you're just like,
Yes.
you know what? I actually enjoy this too.
I get a notification saying story time at 2. Today we're doing Christmas in July. So this is my 13th week of doing this.
Wow.
1-3. I think it started off just, like I said, just as a fluke, and who knew it would have been, sustained. And even when my responsibilities became much more demanding, and so I shifted. I try never to postpone, because little people, you promise them something and they want to. So I'll say to the parents, can we do it at 4 instead of 2, or can we do it on Saturday because I have meetings on Friday? But I always try to stay within that. And it's 13 weeks and going, and now we've brought it down. It was 5 days a week, now it's 3 days, but we're still holding on. Yeah, we're still holding on. I know we weren't
And
talking about that, but
no, but that's an important thing. That's an important thing to discuss. I did want to kind of lean on that a little bit more because you had mentioned you do have a heart for younger, for the younger population. And is it what is the significance of focusing on that population for you? Is it more so to kind of facilitate their growth in terms of focusing on the future versus forging the relationships with folks who are already adults? Like, what's the gratifying part for you in terms of working with the younger population or mentoring, if you will, the younger
and
population?
funny it is you say that, because I think the age group I'm dealing with now, they're from 3 to 9, I think it's the oldest I have there. So this is a newfound passion for me. But before that, it's youth, the young people, because we always say the youth are our future. But I always find that to be cliche. There's some things that are cliche, and you try to tell yourself, well, it's not really a cliche. That to me is cliche. And my background really is in youth work, because I feel that young people need to have a seat at the table. And if you say they are the future doesn't begin tomorrow. It starts now. So if they're not exposed to the issues, if they're not exposed to, being given the chance to speak or being able to articulate, then when the future comes, then they're no good. So you have to do that right now. So that's where my passion is, really, for the youth. But the younger ones, I have just fallen in love with that age group, and it's just a whole different story. But young people, I think, need to be molded. And last year, November, I had the opportunity to be the keynote speaker for the 38th Model OAS General Assembly for 200 young people throughout the Americas. So they flew in Belize, Brazil, Argentina, you name it, Colombia, 200 young people and the advisors, dealing with issues within the hemisphere, from climate change to human rights abuses and things like that. And I am telling you, in my career as ambassador, I have spoken at different events. I have gone to different conferences. To me, that was a pivotal role, because I know our future is in good hands. And there were a lot of young women in there. So the president of the General Assembly and the vice president was, I think, Colombia and Argentina. There were young women, and they were so articulate. And to me, when I see that, then I know we're doing something right. When we have forums like that every year consistently and grooming leaders, and that to me is a beautiful thing, because we cannot have that divide where the next generation is scrambling to find leaders. They have to be molded and groomed. So that's very important. That is very important. So I think for me, that was a moment, just looking out in the audience, but it's just young people, because we tend to talk among ourselves. And what good is that, really? What good is that if you can't really mentor or foster? And that was a good moment for me.
Awesome.
I don't even know what your question was.
That's okay. We started from the most gratifying part of the job, and I just kind of needled some related questions for you. Yeah, we're gonna take.
I didn't want to leave your audience hanging.
Absolutely. So we're gonna take one final commercial break, guys, and we're gonna talk a little bit, something a little bit heavier, but it is still related to what you just talked about in terms of the importance of kind of developing the leaders of tomorrow. So we're gonna take one final commercial break, and this is gonna be quick. Like, you guys already know who watched the show. Our commercial, this last one, is always like 15 seconds. So we'll be right back. Okay, stay tuned.
At Taco John's, you can expect one thing: so good. As in quality ingredients used in tacos and burritos made just for you. Every single bite.
So good.
Expect nothing less at Taco John's.
All right, we are back. All right, so I did want to ask you about, obviously, here in the United States, a lot of the nation is still reeling from the death of George Floyd that happened about a couple months ago now. And I did want to ask you about the reactions you've seen from the diaspora that's here in the US, and if you heard any responses from folks back home in Grenada. Like, did his death have the same impact on the Grenadian community that it had on the community here in the U.S.?
Well, it's funny you ask that. I know members of the Grenadian and the Caribbean diaspora was, caught up. And in that, I have a mentee who is a medical student of Grenadian parentage. She lives in Houston, Texas. And we normally meet on evenings. And she said to me, we can't meet this week. Sorry, Ambassador, but, she needed to go join the protests. And so because she felt that, she needed to be there at the time. So even though our perspectives are different, and you ask, how does Grenada view it? It definitely would be from two different lenses. But at the same time, in Grenada, there was, a peaceful protest, not a very large one, in solidarity. So I don't think it doesn't matter which rock you live in under, you would not have missed it. You would not have missed it. But I think we look at it from different lenses. But I think it's a conversation that has to be had, but it's a conversation that starts within your family at your own dinner table, and then it goes, as I said, there's a progression, but there's nothing wrong with peaceful protests, and we always have to say who feels it knows it really and truly, and while one can condone, acts of violence or things like that, people have the right to protest. And if it is something that you feel is being perpetrated also against you, then you have a right to speak up and find a voice. And you, like I said, it has to start somewhere. And there's a quote, actually. There's a quote I found by Alan W. Watts, and it says, "The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance." And I think that is what is taking place right now. And that's perhaps all I would say on that topic.
Gotcha. And thanks for sharing that portion of it. What do you feel, given your previous conversation about the importance of developing the younger population, whether that's youth as in teens or even, younger children in the single digits, what do you feel is the best next step to ensure they have a better future?
Again, it starts at the dinner table, because if we don't, I remember growing up in a very poor household in Grenada, and what we had more than anything else was love and laughter. Somehow we found ways to laugh at every and anything, and there was love in there. So I think you have to love on your children. You have to make it a safe place in the home for ideas to be exchanged at age appropriate levels. And I think that is very, very important, even with the coronavirus. So we're not even going into politics or into racism or anything like that. Even the coronavirus, my granddaughter, she's like, "Gigi, why can't I go to school? Why is the germs out there? And who brought the germs?" And things like that. So you have to find age appropriate, because they want to go out. And that just takes me back to school reopening and, the hair raising thought of school reopening with little people. You really can't tell. You can't play with your friend, or you have to wear a mask all day, sort of thing. But it really has to start in the home and in the school. So you have to see the school as a transition from the home and vice versa. So you have to reinforce those things within the different, what you call safe havens and the different safety nets within the community. So it's the home, the school, the community, and then you get to high school and university. But you have to build on that, and you really have to see equality not as a privilege, but as a right, and just as what it was meant to be, that we all created equal. And I think if that conversation starts at home, then your children would be able to carry on that conversation safely and not with bias, because then we tend to put biases on things that are not necessarily there. But if you're open enough for that conversation, then you can articulate it openly as well and get someone to listen to. So I think it has a lot to do with listening. And that's a skill that sometimes we think we've perfected. But I think in general, even me, I temper myself, and you have to listen more keenly, not just listen to hear, but listen to understand and respond as well, not just to hear, but to be able to respond appropriately.
Well said. And then my final question for you, Madam Ambassador, what is your advice for someone who would want to enter into your world, someone who is interested in being a diplomat, whether they want to become a consul general, whether they want to become an ambassador to their nation, or represent their nation here in the US, or vice versa? What would be your advice for someone who wants to enter into that realm?
Well, I think you definitely have to be flexible and adaptable because unless you want to just be within your foreign service, if you want to look at diplomacy as in a career and going over, you have to be culturally astute because then more than likely it would take you into foreign places. So you have to be adaptable. You have to be able to take direction. And some people might think this is very prestigious and you're the ambassador and you make decisions. You have to be able to take direction because it comes, you get a remit. So for me, it's from Foreign Affairs and that comes from the Prime Minister. So there are tiers to it. And you also have to be able to be, how should I put it? Well, besides being politically correct, things can change very quickly. Administrations change. So even if you're in one country, the administration could change within that and the policy totally shifts in midstream.
Right.
So you have to be aware of current affairs and politics, not necessarily from a textbook point of view, but you have to be open to learning and reading and just being astute in the way you do it. And I would just tell you what my strategy is. I pray a lot, and I ask for discernment because it's not something that you can take for granted, because you may think you have a handle on something, but you don't always see it from a 360 point of view. So sometimes we can be myopic because you have one remit and you weren't prepared for the curveball that you're thrown. So I think you just have to be flexible, adaptable, be astute, read, and be open to taking advice and taking criticism as well, and taking a licking when you deserve it.
That was another bar, everybody. Humility goes a long way. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your experience, your wealth of experience. We definitely appreciate having you here on the show. And please stick around. I'm going to do a quick wrap here and then just kind of stay on the line backstage. I know it's 2, and I know you got to do story time. So we'll do a quick wrap backstage. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise with our audience. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me on Politics and Power, and my very best to FNN. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Yep, no problem. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so that does it for us here at the FNN Politics and Power Series for your Tuesday episode. Ambassador Week continues on Thursday, but we'll give you the information on that, of course, on our social media. Speaking of social media, if you haven't yet, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. You can find us at Florida National News on Facebook, on Instagram, and on YouTube. When you go to YouTube, be sure to subscribe and click the bell so you get all of our notifications for all of our different shows, not just Politics and Power. And also be sure, if you are a small business owner, if you're interested, shoot us a quick email at ads@Florida National News. If you are interested in advertising on our platform, we offer 5 different shows. Or if you're interested in sponsoring a particular episode of a show or sponsoring a series, we will be glad to have that conversation with you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And of course, you guys know me, I'm Mellissa Thomas. I will be back at 5 p.m. this afternoon with your evening news rundown. And since it is Tuesday, you will also catch the lovely Jamesia Stoudemire with the entertainment 4 for 4 today. But that does it for us here at the Politics and Power Series. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your afternoon.